and thank you for welcoming me this evening. And tonight's talk is called StarFront Observatory, a New Journey for an Urban Astronomer. And speaking of urban astronomy, for those of you who get Sky and Telescope, the digital edition just came out with an article on urban astrophotography. That was mine, and it'll be in print in the March edition. So when I lived in Charlottesville, Virginia, I had an observatory in my backyard. It was a 10-foot dome, and I had a 12.5-inch Ritchie Chrétien mounted on a Paramount. And as you can see, I had a seeing monitor, a weather station, and this telescope was fully robotic. So it would run autonomously until it broke. So my longest run before anything broke was 6 weeks. It had the reliability of a British sports car. And, but it was a lot of fun. And when I say robotic, I would actually upload the entire Herschel 400, and this thing would open itself up, chill down, select the best object at that moment, complete it, go on to the next object. And if the weather rolled in, it would close the dome, but stay open until it cleared up. So it was autonomous. It was a lot of fun. As a mechanical engineer, it was like a clubhouse. My kids had sleepovers in it. And as I described, it was fully autonomous, and I could access it from anywhere in the world. But it had disadvantages. First of all, it was expensive. It could fail in the middle of the night, and if it failed in the middle of the night with the dome open and weather came in, there was a risk that it would get rained on. It never happened, but it did fail in the middle of the night when clouds came in, but it never got rained on. The skies in Charlottesville were Bortle 4.5, and they may be Bortle 5 today. I had a very limited horizon, and I dealt with Central Virginia weather. So I dismantled that observatory in 2017 when we moved Rosslyn. I do urban astronomy now in Bortle-9 skies. We are officially in the heart of Bortle-9 territory in Rosslyn. The skies are literally tied for the worst in the world. But I do have a south-facing balcony. I use light pollution filters. I participate at Sky Meadows. So what I basically did is I dismantled the observatory and I traded it for 3 grandchildren, which is a pretty good deal. So we moved up here. The kids and the grandchildren are here, and you know, I morphed my astronomy hobby. So as somebody who's very interested in having an observatory, I had, a number of options. Number one, we could move to Arizona. And I figured, well, that would be the end of a 40-year marriage. So I'm not going to do that. We could buy land in Arizona and kind of commute. That would put stress on a 40-year marriage. I could think about buying land west of DC, very expensive, build an observatory. But the thing is, when you think about going out to Delaplane or Sky Meadows, the skies are deteriorating. And what may be Bortle 4 today may be heading towards Bortle 5. Or you could do something like rent a dome out west. So that was a very popular model where you could rent, and whether it was your telescope or a rented telescope, an entire dome. And you're talking $2,000 or $3,000 a month. Enter StarFront Observatory, and here a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is a new model. And by the way, there are a number of NOVAC members who have telescopes there, including the guy who drove my telescope down. I'll tell you all about that. So anyway, what they did is they really made remote observing inexpensive. And what they did is created these inexpensive roll-off roofs. There are 10 buildings, but they've laid out their next 10, and they literally have acreage to build 100 of these. And so from the picture, you really get the idea. Let me see if I have more pictures of that. So I have a telescope on one of these piers, and they advertise Bortle 1 skies. I would say, quite frankly, it's more like Bortle 1.5 to 2, but the skies are very, very good. 225 clear nights a year, they advertise. I believe that. They have an on-site astronomer that makes real-time roof decisions. So with my rental of $200 a month, that includes data, very high-speed data. They're in the middle of nowhere, but they're right next to a telecommunications center, electricity, on-hand, on-site tech support. But think about it, rather than having weather sensors making open, closed decisions, they have astronomers there all night long. So that's very cool. Very high level of technical expertise. These are young people who have now installed over 600 telescopes. And, you know, they've seen everything, okay? So my installation is on the conventional side, so there's nothing difficult for them. And relative to all the other options that I cited, very inexpensive. An individual dome would be $2,000 or $3,000. Buying property west of Washington, D.C. probably starts at $250,000 before you begin developing it. $200 a month seems like a pretty good deal. And as I said, the data is, I'm going up and down at 500 megabits per second. They have 8 fiber optic lines coming into the property. It's really good service. So where is it? It is in East Cupcake, Texas. Okay, I actually just made up the name. It's actually not East Cupcake. I think it's Rockwood. It is in the hill country, and it is in the middle of nowhere. Very, very dark skies. About 2.5 hours southwest of Dallas, 2.5 hours northwest of Austin. So you can get there if you fly in and rent a car. And this was part of a video I was going to show. Paul said the video would just break the bank on data. So he said, just show a couple of pictures. And this gives you a good idea. If you go to the StarFront, if you just Google StarFront Observatory, when you go to the homepage, they have a really nifty little 1-minute flyover with a drone that will just show you the idea. But I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. They've made a remote observatory affordable and accessible for the average person. And there's late breaking news. They're planning an observatory in the Southern Hemisphere, and I am in. Okay, so I won't be their first customer. I will be tied for the first customer. So they've got 600 customers now, and on day one, if 100 of them sign up, I'm going to be one of those people, because that just seems too cool to pass up. So the question then becomes, and this was a very big deal, how do you get the equipment there? The one thing I couldn't replace is my telescope. I am fortunate to have an Astrophysics 130 GTX, and that thing came off a 9-year waiting list, and you can't buy them. You could get on cloudy nights in Astromart till the cows come home, but you can't buy one of these. So I was nervous about that. And one option that I had was I was going to fly there and buy a seat for the telescope. And fortunately, the seats weren't that expensive. It's like $119, each way to Dallas. I'd probably ship the case back in the belly of the aircraft, but the telescope would ride with me. So I was figuring this all out, and I was going to, buy a seat and rent a car. I'd need a hotel at least for one night. When Michael Kelly said, "Hey, everybody, I'm going down to StarFront." And so Michael generously transported all of my equipment down there. I chipped in a little bit for gas, but I am just eternally grateful to him for that and for his friendship. He knows so much more about StarFront. He did at the time that he really helped me through the process. The equipment configuration, this is going to be 2 slides, is very conventional. For example, I had a Rainbow Astro RST 135 mount. They didn't have any of those at StarFront. And they said, well, you can send it down, we'll figure it out. I said, well, what do you have? He said, well, we have a lot of ZWO AM5Ns. I said, I'll get one of those. We have over 200 of those. Let me send you something that you have. So the configuration is an AP130. I have a 0.8 telecompressor in it, so it's fast. A ZWO 6200 full frame sensor. So my field of view is about 3 by 2 degrees. It's like a one-shot mosaic, and I'm now shooting mosaics beyond that. I have the AM5 harmonic mount. One big advantage that the ZWO mount has, it has an electronic brake. So the ZWO, the Rainbow, if the power gets cut off, it can go, So if you lose power in the middle of the night, and I have a UPS on this thing, you could be in trouble. But if the power gets cut to the ZWO mount, it locks. I have a ZWO-E focuser, filter wheel, a set of astronomic filters, 2-inch unmounted, and I just installed a camera angle adjuster, a ZWO. I will say one thing about the filters. If you're using a full frame sensor, I started with ZWO mounted filters, and I got vignetting in the corners. And so I upgraded just in the last couple of months with the astronomic filters, and it's just transformed the images and eliminated the vignetting. So, you know, between mounted filters and going 2-inch unmounted, you get 3 more millimeters, and it turns out that's what you need to cover a full frame sensor. Continuing, I have a guide scope, very nice one by Ascar, with a very inexpensive ZWO guide camera. I have a Deep Space Dad flip flap panel. So what happens is I can close the panel and I can open the panel. And what's very cool about it is that's the only panel that will work with the ASI Air. So everything else needs a USB connection and software. But with the ASI Air, they built a special cable, and by toggling 2 of the power connections, you can do everything you need to do. So not only do I get a protective cover for my lens, I can shoot flats through this thing. So I think it came from Croatia or Slovenia, and it's just a little mechanical marvel. I have a Pegasus Pocket Power Box, a micro, which I use as a DO computer. I'll talk a little bit about DO. I have a pair of DO heater straps. I have an ASI computer, a peer camera that helps me see if everything's okay, so I can really monitor the status of this remote instrument. And I have a remote controlled power strip. And incidentally, every single thing on the pier other than the pier is mine. Okay, these guys don't provide even a cable or a power strip. The model is, we give you a pier, you send us everything you need to turn it into a telescope. So what I would say, the reason I'm calling attention to this is not a robotic system by my definition of robotic. It's highly automated, but every night I send a plan to it. And, you know, I was a little bit concerned about that when I started, and I thought to myself, am I going to be able to keep this busy? But it turns out you can write a 5-minute plan that keeps this thing going for 10 hours. And in fact, if I'm shooting 10 objects for an hour each as they approach the transit point, I can be running the same plan night after night for 5 or 6 nights. So planning is very easy. It's very easy to keep this build busy, but it's not autonomous. And what that also means is if the roof closed, this thing is going to keep trying to do something. So it'll slew and it'll say, I can't find the object, and it'll just sit there for hours while I'm sleeping saying, you know, still can't find anything. And then I wake up and the thing is saying it hasn't found anything, but at least, you know, the telescope doesn't get smacked into a pier. Dew prevention is robotic. So what happens here is there's a dew sensor and it's just monitoring 24/7. And it's got a relative humidity and temperature sensor. It calculates the dew point. I tested this at home before I sent it down there, and I thought to myself, well, how am I going to test this? And I well, you know, I could take the sensor and maybe put it into the shower and turn on the temperature, you know, the water, and see if I could simulate. And I said, no, you know, I've got an idea. I'll wrap it in plastic, loosely wrapped in plastic, and I'll dunk it in an ice bath. And sure enough, you know, the dew point came down and the heaters came on. And then I took it out and it was still cold. And then the dew heaters really came on because of the dew point. And so I was satisfied that this worked, and I sent it down. And it has 2 outputs, and I have 2 dew heater straps on my telescope. It looked like dual racing straps. And that's my margin of safety for dew, because it thinks it's controlling 2 separate telescopes, but I know I'm controlling 1 telescope with 2 dew straps. So this is a truly robotic feature where it's monitoring conditions 24/7 and adapting. But otherwise, I would not call this robotic, not by the standards of my Charlottesville observatory that was fully autonomous. So we start setting up, and there were a couple of small bumps, the kind of things you would expect. First of all, there was a 3-week backlog. I had some minor startup problems. One cable wasn't seated. A cable snagged on the first meridian flip, and it did it twice. And when I say the cable snagged, I can't begin to tell you the torque that a ZW-AM5 harmonic drive mount makes. I mean, that cable is, that mount's going to go whether the cable splits or not. And it just ripped the cable out at the USB connector. I was lucky it didn't damage the camera. So, when you snap a cable at the other end of an astronomical mount, it's a violent process. So I had 2 of those happen. And there was a nearby LED light, and they had to tape that up. And the polar alignment took a few tries. But I would call all of this, a couple of weeks of startup problems, and it's been very reliable since. This is what the rig looks like, and I'm very, very happy with it. I think it's, looks a little majestic. I'm a little, biased. But as you can see, you've got my dual racing straps, which is my dew heater. By the way, for anybody who really wants to learn about dew, there's a YouTube called The Physics of Dew by an amateur astronomer, professor of physics at the University of Florida somewhere. It's very easy to find, and tells you all about dew prevention. And it tells you, well, all about, my wife looked over and he said, what are you watching there? You've been on your YouTube for about an hour. I said, oh, it's really something. It's on the physics of dew. And she just looked at me knowingly and said, oh, that's nice, but it was very engaging. And so anyway, these dew heaters are placed where they should be. And my margin of safety is there's twice the amount of heat being applied than is necessary. And if you look closely, you'll see the AM5 mount. You can see the ASI computer on the left there. On the right, you can see the guide scope. These are the top views. Better look at the guide scope, the focuser. You can see the filter wheel just by the camera. This was all taken before the camera angle adjuster went in. And this is the view from the pier camera. So I'm looking up, and I've got a really good look at the telescope. From this view, I can see if the flap is open. But I've also found, if I attach the main camera and I take a picture and I can't see anything, only one of 2 things will cause that. The roof is closed or the panel is closed. So, but it's nice to be able to see that open. And then when I was just trying to understand the action of the camera angle adjuster, all I had to do was slew the telescope to the southwest, and that presented a view of the cables and the camera angle adjuster right above the pier camera. So if I'm doing some kind of an engineering test, I can manipulate the telescope to put whatever I need to see right above the pier camera. So the pier camera is pretty handy. Now, I have 2 slides in here, 2 topics, and I'm not going to discuss them today because they're very detailed, and these charts are eye charts. The first is linking the ASI to the iPad. The reason I put in all the detail here is these presentations are going to go up on the NOVAC website, and for months and years ahead, people are going to want to see how to do that. I will give you the summary. It's very easy. I didn't know anything about it, and when I was getting this set up, I said, hey, I don't know anything about that. They said, don't worry, we know how to do this. We'll have you up and running in 5 minutes. And so they got all my gear up there, and they sent me some software, and now I can get on an iPad or an iPhone, and I can access this from anywhere in the world. And it was easy. This part was easy. The hard part, however, was doing the file transfer. So the way I have it set up is I can double click on a network location on my PC that literally opens up the drive in Windows. And when I did this on the Windows 10 machine, it was easy. And then when I did it on the Windows 11 machine, it wouldn't work. And the reason it wouldn't work is Windows 11 came out and outsmarted everybody and required all kinds of permissions. And you had to go in there and disable permissions that would prevent these transfers. And I'm not going to go through the process except to say it took me 2 days to figure it out and 2 lines of code to solve the problem. So it was 2 things that were true that had to be turned to false, and the problem went away. And this is now part of the knowledge base. So this is now documented at StarFront. And this getting through the permissions actually requires 2 slides. 3 slides. So basically, a lot of detailed information. I'm not going to get there. If you set up something in StarFront, just remember there's information on how to access it from your iPad or iPhone and how to do the file transfers. So you get a bunch of stuff when you join StarFront, and one of the things that you get is a community. You know, so you get a peer, you get electricity, you get data, you get a night observatory astronomer, but you also get a community, and they have a thing called Discord, which is just a platform. And there are all kinds of subgroups. For example, there's an ASI subgroup, a Gear Talk subgroup, a Scope Trader setup, a Deep Space DAD forum for everybody. I mean, I think practically every panel down there is a DSD panel. And they make announcements and they do weather. But what's really cool is they do programs. And they do very frequent building meet and greets. So people who just want to meet their neighbors can get online and talk to people who have telescopes there. They have science programs. And then periodically they have a program where one of the owners of the business comes in. He calls it AMA, Ask Me Anything. And it was at the last AMA that I learned about the Southern Hemisphere installation. So now I want to go to the next AMA and see, have you made any progress? So now I'm kind of dialed into this thing. But it's very nice because there is a community that connects virtually of people with a lot of shared experience. So one other thing that you get is an observatory status website. And it looks like this, where you get all of the timings of when the roof's open, when sunset. This little graph here actually shows you when the moon rises. And so at a glance, you can really see what's going on. You get your weather forecast, your satellite maps, your clear sky chart, which gives you the hour-by-hour cloud forecast. You get a sky view, and then you get a building camera. And here is, this is in building 8, which is where I am. And my telescope is right here. And you can see a close-up. And it's right here. And you can just barely make out one of the doohies. So customer service is not free. But it sure is a lot cheaper than buying a ticket to fly out to Arizona to fix something that's broken, you know? So they bill out at $50 an hour in 15-minute, $12.50 increments. That's not too bad, especially when you think about flying somewhere, renting a car, getting a hotel. You know, getting a bill for $12.50 seems like a pretty good deal. So the first thing that I did was I updated a firmware on my flat panel. These guys had to download the firmware, install it using a USB cable because there was a special control cable into the ASI, but they had to show up with a laptop, show up with cables, download the firmware, update the settings, and I got a bill for 16 bucks. Well, that felt pretty good to me. The second ticket was the aforesaid a filter swap. Well, that was more complicated because I swapped out the ZWO mounted filters for the astronomic, very high quality unmounted. Well, that's pretty complicated because you had to remove the camera, remove the filter wheel, take out all of those little tiny screws, take out the filters, pack them. I sent them a self-addressed box to return them so I could sell them on cloudy nights. Then install the filters, which each had a little plastic mask, 3 teensy screws, okay, all, you know, with their cold hands out in this building, pack it all up, do it right, put it all in the right place. And I got a bill for 53 bucks, and that felt pretty good. And then I sent the DO computer down there, and that was just attaching the DO computer, the temperature, humidity sensor, and the second DO strap, following my learning more about DO from this wonderful video, The Physics of DO. And that was $12.50. And at that point, I said to Rose, well, gosh, the rig is just really complete. I've really solved this do problem. I just can't see buying anything else. I think, the rig is the way it's going to be. And she smiled knowingly and said, oh, that's really nice. Whereupon I subsequently bought the camera angle adjuster. And I said to her, well, now the rig is really complete. And she smiled and looked at me knowingly and said, well, that's really nice. So Rose is very supportive of all this. Okay, so now the rig's in operation. And it's highly automated, but as I said, it's not, by my definition, I think by most people's definition, it's not autonomous and therefore robotic. So it's all about plans, not staying up all night. It's on Central Time, but it's also halfway west in the time zone. So in terms of sunrises and sunsets, it's about an hour and a half west of us. But the plans take 5 to 10 minutes to write. The telescope runs all night. And after the plan will home the mount, turn off the cooler, and it will also return the camera angle adjuster to the starting position. And then in the morning, I transfer the files. And I do not trust the SD card in the ASI. So when I drag those files over, I have network attached storage at my home. So the files are on the PC, and within about 30 seconds, there are 2 copies on a RAID. So I have a redundant array set up. And then once a week, I have my conventional backup. So I immediately have 3 copies. And then inside of a week, I have a 4th copy to an incremental backup, which means that every day I take the files off the SD card. The SD card's blank. It's much easier for me because I always know there aren't any files on it. So I know which ones, if I wasn't doing that, I would have to comb through and get tonight's files. It's easier just to trash them. So I just don't trust the SD card as far as I could throw it. And that's how I do this. Now, there are many ways to capture images. Mine is the ASI. It's not the most sophisticated by any means, but I use the ASI a lot for my urban astrophotography. And what I reasoned was, if I stuck with the ASI, which I've really mastered, it's so simple and I know it backwards and forwards, I would only have one software ecosystem. And if I adopted any of these other solutions, and Voyager, well, NEAN is very popular. It's not the best, but it's free. Free is very powerful. Voyager's popular Sequence Generator Pro is what Mike Kelly uses. ACP, by the way, has announced that they will no longer support it. Bob Denny said he's retiring, and he gave everybody 1 year. They get to keep their software, but there will be no more support. So ACP is now finished. So for me, I'd say, in a nutshell, the reason I go with the ASI is I was familiar with it, and I wanted to have a single ecosystem. And that works for me. And I lose some features that the more powerful programs have, but it's just very clean. So Rose asked me, when I go out to Sky Meadows, it takes about 20 minutes to pack up the car. It takes an hour to drive out there. It takes 20 minutes to set up. So it's like an hour and 40 minutes. You get 2 or 3 hours of observation and then 2 hours going back. So you're talking 3 or 4 hours of overhead for 2 or 3 hours of observing. So Rose asked, well, how long does it take for you to get started each night? And I said, well, it takes about a minute. Think of my rig at StarFront as being a jet engine on the runway with its engine running. The only thing that takes any time is I do like to chill the camera. So what I will do is log in. I will just turn everything on, start up my plan, chill the camera, push the go button. So it takes about a minute, but I don't do it a minute before the plan is supposed to execute. I do it sometime earlier in the evening so the camera's nice and cold and I don't have any frost on it or anything, but it's fast. So this is what the ecosystem looks like. This is the panel of an ASI, and this is what a plan looks like, where you have all your objects. And what's really nice is the ASI gives you the altitude, and it's really cool because you can play with them and just move them quickly and optimize it for altitude. And then for each object, you can decide what you're shooting. I normally shoot broadband LRGB. So typical is I carve everything up into an hour, 10 3-minute luminescence, 3 each in RGB, comes out to be an hour with overhead. So what's really great is you can plan your evening throughout. And if you have a gap in time with nothing to observe, you can say, oh, I'll shoot this target for 2 hours. I seldom shoot for longer than 2 hours because I'm always shooting near the meridian. And then what happens is you hit go, and literally right down to the second, the plan starts and it says, okay, I'm going to the target. And then it says, I'm going to validate whether it's centered or not. And then it's going to say, well, it's uncentered because the tolerance is very precise. And then it's going to say, okay, we're centered. So, you know, if you want to know where the target is, just look in the center because it's going to be centered. And then it goes through a very, very nice autofocus routine. I could do it where, you know, I do it once during the night. I could do it once an hour, once every 2 hours. I can do anything like that. I actually refocus for every target. And what I found is it's very interesting. First of all, the focus is incredibly repeatable. And when I say repeatable, I mean, it gets cold. And so you would expect the telescope tube to contract and the focuser to come in. And that's exactly what happens. It comes in a few pips every single target right through the night. And it's just so repeatable that, you know, the filters are parfocal. And so the filters have, the focus has worked very well for me. And then what happens is, okay, it's done focusing, and then it shows you the 2-second pointing model. So when it went to this target, and I think this is the butterfly cluster, it goes there. That's what 2 seconds on the butterfly cluster would look, because it's now focused, and now it's taking the first, well, as you can see, 180 seconds. This has 168 seconds left. So all this is, you've gone there, you got 2 seconds. Oh, by the way, 2 seconds, it sees 5,000 stars, and you get your centering, and then it goes, and then it looks like that. So that's 3 minutes on this target. So the subframes are just breathtaking. You know, on some targets, when I do the color processing and they're matching data points to the Gaia spacecraft, I'm matching 60,000 stars. And that's just in the field of view, there are 60,000 stars that match. Goodness knows how many actual stars there are. And then all the while it's guiding, and this is what the guiding frame looks like. I don't love guiding. When I go out to Sky Meadows, you know, it takes a few nights to get guiding work, but the nice thing about it is once you get it working, it generally doesn't break. And so, you know, there are like 12 parameters in auto guiding in the ASI ecosystem. And, you know, you're fiddling with it. You're saying, okay, I want a little more of this, a little less of this. And it's just, you know, it's got a little voodoo in it, you know. But once I got it working, it stayed working. And of course, everything is documented. So I keep an observatory notebook. All my computer settings are documented. I found this was very helpful with my observatory in my backyard. Something will break, and then a year goes by, and you say, gosh, I remember that breaking. How did I fix that? And if you document it, you've got all of your solutions. So everything is documented. Now, I'm going to now just whip through my astro images just to give you some samples, and then I'll just throw this open for questions. So my astro images can be found on AstroBin. Here's the web address, and my name there is Rob Wash DC Astro. That's a handy name. So I shoot by and large LRGB, but Michael Kelly, who's been so generous with his time and helped me. Basically, nobody ever went wrong listening to Michael, because you know, Michael really is a world-class astrophotographer. And I've also gotten advice from Gowrie, who is, you know, world-class, and also I'd say kind of Gowrie is sort of what I would call a Jedi Knight of astro-imaging processing. And they've collaborated on some images, and you look at Michael's data capture put together with Gowrie's, you know, image processing, and you got one of the best teams on the planet right now. So anyway, Michael said, well, you know, when you're sending your unmounted filters down there, you ought to send a hydrogen alpha filter. And I said, well, what good's that going to do? And he says, well, you know, the moon doesn't reflect hydrogen alpha, so you can run HA images during the full moon. And I thought to myself, well, it's a lot of black and white images. And then Roland Christian, who has a great site, and he's the astrophysics company owner. I went to his AstroBim site, and there are all these hydrogen alpha images, and they just look great. So I become a real fan of these monochrome HA images, but it does keep my rig going all the time. I do my color calibration with the spectrophotometric color calibration in PixInsight. So the colors are as true scientifically as an amateur astronomer can get. They're basically taking all of these data points, comparing it to the way the colors should look as seen from the Gaia spacecraft, and applying a correction. What's very gratifying for me is before I do the color correction, I get a color, and then I apply the correction, and actually the correction is always very subtle. So, but there's always a correction. So my filters and my process are resulting in good colors, and then we get these very scientifically accurate colors with SPCC. My images are typically 4 to 5 hours. They're processed very lightly in PixInsight. I do a gradient correction. Michael taught me about that because I had these wicked gradients, and he said, "Are you doing gradient correction?" And it's like, you know, that was like a revolution for me. I do an RGB combine. I do the SPCC. I do a stretch. I do blur exterminator, noise exterminator, an LRGB combine. I do curves. Sometimes I will apply morphological transformation, and I'll just see, do I like the way that image looks? And then sometimes with nebula, especially, I'll do a star exterminator, process the nebulosity, and recombine the image. And I'm now doing mosaics, and I'm becoming addicted to mosaics. They're tremendously fun, and they're very easy to capture with the ASI, and very easy to process in Pix. So I'm just going to whip through this stuff, just a few seconds per image. You guys know what this is. That's the Cocoon Nebula. That's the Elephant Trunk. You guys know what that is. Come on. My 7-year-old grandson knows what that is. You know, this is the Pleiades. Very, very happy with this. This is an example. This was something really interesting to me, and really taught me something. This is M52. Well, what is M52? Well, it's a star cluster. Well, I'm shooting all the messier objects. I'm grinding through. I've got about 77 of them now. So towards the end of the the 1-year cycle, I'll have the entire messier catalog. But one of the things that I've learned is that if you shoot 2 degrees by 3 degrees, there's a surprise in every single image. I mean, and when I shot M52, there was a big surprise because I didn't realize how close the Bubble Nebula was. Well, now with the camera angle adjuster, I'm going into Sky Safari, and when I go pick an object, I'm just asking myself, hey, is there anything nearby that I need to get into the field? But I will say, absolutely, a 2 by 3. People say, well, what's the most powerful telescope? Well, first of all, the most powerful telescope is the one that you're just using every day. Whether it's a sea star, if you're out having fun and using it, that's power. But the field of view of the Hubble, I mean, I actually have the Hubble field of view in Sky Safari. I mean, it's just tiny compared to, this. And when you see these beautiful pictures, these guys are running mosaics. And at 2 degrees by 3 degrees, it has such a broad grasp that you see surprises in literally every single photograph. And for me, that's power. Now, it's a different kind of power than if you're running half-meter plane wave, because that's light grasp power. But I would say for me, the wide field has been a lot of fun. You guys know what this is. So I shot the Western and Eastern Veil. My grandchildren love the Heart Nebula for obvious reasons. The Soul is on the creepy side for me. I find the Soul and the Pelican Nebula very creepy. The pelican almost looks like kind of a desiccated pelican, like a pelican mummy, So this is not my favorite object. M33 Triangulum. This is an example of seeing a bunch of stuff in one picture because you have the lagoon, the Triffin, and another Messier star cluster. So here are 3 Messier objects in one image. That's a lot of fun. You've got the Eagle Nebula, the double cluster, a perennial favorite. Are those pictures coming out okay on the screen? Can you see them okay? Yeah, okay. This is the Crescent Nebula, and I don't know if I show this with morphological transformation. We'll see. This is one of those objects that, you know, where you dial down the stars and you focus on the morphological structure of the nebulosity, and it comes out really well. This is a galaxy, a globular cluster. I think it might be Hercules, I'm not sure, or Pegasus maybe. One of the Messiers, I think this might be 106. Don't hold me to that. This is very interesting. This is 3 Able galaxy clusters in one field of view. So here, you know, you've got 1, 2, and 3. Let me see if I have the annotated image here. Yeah. So it's really cool is that's the object. I said, well, there's a lot of galaxies in that field. Well, how many galaxies are there? Well, the red letters are NGCs, and the aqua blue-green image labels are the principal galaxy catalog, PGC. There are a lot of galaxies in that field. This is M15, and Roland Christian wrote to me, and he said, wow, this is really great image, Rob. I had never seen this structure here. Well, first of all, a lot of people are shooting this like this. And here, you know, I just processed it to develop that nebulosity. And Roland Christian has now put a like on 9 of my images. And that would be like, you know, Thomas Keller showing up in our kitchen, trying Rose's beef Wellington and saying, yeah, this really came out well, Rose. And Rose would just say, great, I'm done cooking. I reached the mountaintop. And, you know, Roland liking an image is like, okay, good time to give up astrophotography. This is, I think, the Owl cluster, but I'm not sure. Some more basic. I think the reason I showed this one here is this was very interesting because of the dust lanes, the dark nebula, and that's when Michael said, "Have you tried morphological transformation?" And so on my AstroBin site, I showed this with and without morphological transformation. It really dials down the stars and just really brings out the dark nebula. Another Messier object. This is either M74 or M77. Let me see the next one. And what I love about this image is this is an example of just all these surprises. I mean, when I shot this from my observatory, I got this. And now you just see all of these, not little galaxies, but pretty well-developed galaxies in the field of view. I mean, I just love that. Another Messier cluster. I should have made a list of what everything is here. I think this is M25, the Sagittarius star cloud. I think, not sure. This was a real surprise to me. I shot a comet, and unbeknownst to me, when I shot it, it was passing in front of this is, I think, the Eagle or the Omega. I think this is the Eagle. Thank you. Yeah, right. This was Swan. And what was really interesting is comets are really hard to process. And the reason they're really hard to process is they're moving so fast. So I thought to myself, you know, if I try to process this thing and take 5 hours on it, I'm going to have to separate the comet, process it, stick it back on the image. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shoot this one fast. 4 1-minute images in LRGB. This is 16 minutes, period. How far is the comet going to move in 16 minutes? And I stacked it. And I said, whoa, look at that. You know, you know, this nebula kind of photobombed it. And so that was a lot of fun. And actually, after this came out, a lot of people caught the same image because this comet had a lot of traction and people were watching it every night. And one night it just happened to pass in front of the nebula. This is the Cone Nebula together with the Christmas tree cluster. This is one where I applied morphological transformation, so you don't see all the stars, but it really develops the nebulosity. And then I started playing with mosaics. So this is the eastern and western veil together, just in hydrogen alpha. So what I did was I said to myself, well, you know, the moon is up. I think I'm going to learn how to do mosaics. Well, what do you do when the moon's up? Well, you shoot hydrogen alpha. So I started shooting a bunch of hydrogen alpha mosaics to teach myself how to do mosaics. And it turns out it's less difficult than you would think. And then I think this is the very last image. This was a, how does this look on the screen? Doesn't do it justice. But this is the longest amount of data I've collected on any image. It was 7.5 hours per panel, 6 panels. So just a huge part of the Orion constellation, where these are the 3 stars of the belt, and this is the sword. So this is a big honking bit of sky. And if you want to get a better look at this one, go to the AstroBib site. I'd love for people to visit. You can follow me there, and every time I post an image, you'll get a notification. And I think that's it, with about 18 minutes for questions. So, any questions on StarFront? I know that we have members who have rigs down at StarFront, and Jeff Ball has one down there. He generously offered to transport. Michael Kelly has something like 4. Juan has a rig there. There are, there've got to be 8 to 10 NOVAC rigs, and I think a lot more are going. So I think there's a lot of interest in this. Any questions about this? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the short answer is yes, I can see small stuff, but the telescope. So, for example, if you're going to shoot the entire Messier catalog, you're going to look at some small stuff. You know, you're going to look at the Ring Nebula. You know, the Dumbbell Nebula. You're going to look at. Oh, there are a lot of examples. This is not the best instrument for that. Okay, and you know, it's funny. I went on the astrophysics site and I said, well, would you use the telecompressor or would you use the field flattener? And half the people said, oh, I'd go with the telecompressor, and half said I'd go with the field flattener. And of course, by going with the telecompressor, I went from F6 to F5, okay? And people said, you know, you really enjoy the field of view, but on very small objects, you pay a price. Why did I go with the telecompressor? Well, it saved me $100 a month because it shortened the telescope by just enough to fit on a $200 a month pier. And if I went with the field flattener, it was going to cost me $100 a month. And so I was sitting here making this decision. I said, gosh, you know, flip a coin. Do I want to shoot at F5? Do I want to shoot at F6? Oh, you save $100 at F5? Oh, okay, yeah, I think I'll shoot F5. But definitely, if you look at Michael's work with a 12.5-inch plane wave, you know, you're going to see a lot more detail in small objects. And if you only have one telescope, you know, that's a trade-off, you know. And I have a long backlog of really terrific targets to look at. But I'd say some of these very small targets, like to complete the Messier catalog, I'm just taking record shots. And they're, even though the astrophysics is a fine instrument, I'm not posting them on AstroBin because they're just not that good. I'm saying, okay, there's, you know, the Ring Nebula. That's okay, you know, but, you know, you should have seen it in my Ritchie Chrétien in my backyard at, you know, 12.5-inch f9. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, the first question was, you know, can you see detail in small objects?
Sure. So I guess my question is really more about StarFront. So you put you said there are a lot of people that have like AM5Ns out there.
Yeah. Well, they have everything down there.
Yeah, no, I get, but I mean, I guess for me, both my wife and I have harmonic mounts. We love them because they're light and they're portable and everything. But when you're sending something out there, like what's the advantage in sending harmonic versus like a traditional thing that you're going to permanently mount in an observatory?
Well, a harmonic is, first of all, the question, yeah, so why a harmonic mount? Well, what I liked about the harmonic mount is it was pretty inexpensive. I mean, it was, well, I'll tell you, you know, it was really inexpensive because I was going to wait right before I flew down there with the telescope, and then I was going to buy the mount and have it drop shipped to StarFront. And at that time, it was $2,000. Well, they announced the tariffs. The telescope went up to $2,500. But Michael said to me, "Hey, I'll take your telescope down." And I said, "Great, I'll order the mount." I ordered the mount for $2,000. 2 days later, it went up by $500. So I'm not even out of the gate, and Michael saved me $500. You know, so the AM5 is very well respected. It's a very strong mount. I've got 25 pounds on a mount that can heft 44, so I'm well within its tolerance. It's bang on accurate, and people there are familiar with it. But I would say you see a lot of astrophysics mounts down there, Mach 1s, bigger mounts. You see paramounts. You know, you see everything. But when I was talking to the staff at StarFront, and they said, "Well, we've never seen a rainbow, but we'll give it, you know, we can do anything." I said, "Well, what do you see a lot of?" He says, "Well, the mount that we have the single most of down here, I mean, if we have 550 telescopes at that time," he said, "we have over 200 AM5s. I said, "What do you think?" He says, "We love them. They're bulletproof. They never break. You know, they're just, the harmonic mounts are just, there's nothing in them to break." So, you know, it was cheap, rugged. The guys at StarFront loved it. I got one. Other questions? Anything online, Paul? Oh, thank you very much. Well, Michael says your color correction on something is good. You know, that's pretty high praise. You know, if Gowrie or Michael like your image, you know, you're in a good place. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm just curious, when you send your plan, you just go to bed, or can you actually look at this thing real time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So basically, I send the plan, okay, and then it's running throughout the night, and then I can monitor how it's going. And every now and then there will be something unexpected, and I can stop the plan, make an adjustment, and restart it. So the plan has the capability to start at a certain time, but you can also start it now. So right now, because it's getting dark early, I have it starting at 7 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock our time. But let's say at 9 o'clock it starts shooting an image and it's off center, or there's something unexpected. You know, it starts shooting and there's a really cool object right next to it. And I say, "Wow, I didn't know that was right there. I think I want to recompose that image. I'm going to stop my plan. I'm going to go to my star atlas, get to the coordinates right between those two objects, resubmit it, rejigger the plan, and then hit start now." So in any case, you can monitor it throughout the night, and you can also stop it and restart it. Now, let's say it's halfway through and you have 10 objects and you've shot 5 of them. Well, then what you do is you have to reset the plan, and then you turn off the objects it's already shot. And what's really cool is as you turn them off, it says start now. And if it was starting now, but shooting everything you've already shot, all of the altitudes would be off. But basically, you know, as you turn off the objects that it's already shot, you can see all of the altitudes adjusted in real time to an ideal level, and you can start at the ideal place. So yes, with the ASI, I have the capacity on my iPad or iPhone anywhere in the world to watch what it's doing right now. Any other questions? Oh, we got a question?
No, in Indy. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's my
I'm sorry,
pleasure.
I really thought you were somebody else. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
I
okay.
think we should have a count of how many Robs or Roberts we have in this group, because with 1,400 people, I have trouble remembering everybody. So I apologize.
No, not at all.
I didn't.
Well, this was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
And we have our special NOVAC for coming to see us in person.
Oh, wow. Look at this. Some swag here.
So we only got a couple of those left. So, you know, it's don't lose that. And no, but I think it's I've talked about you a number of times about doing the remote observing and the good stuff you've been doing. And now it's really great to put your face to what
Well,
you're doing.
I think it's very timely because I think there's a lot of interest in this. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more rigs going
Yes,
down.
yeah.
And the thing is, these guys have priced it to make it accessible to a lot of people. So
Yeah.
anyway, my pleasure.
Thank you very
so
much. Appreciate it. And this is yours, I think.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to need that.
May I ask a question?
Oh, sure. Here, we've got time. Go right ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, hi. Sorry if I'm butting in here, but I don't think you guys can see my raised hand. My question is this. For those of us that couldn't or can't afford to rent a full-size or a full-time rather opportunity to observe, are you aware of any kind of program where you can rent time on a telescope at this location in order to maybe use it for a couple hours a night and then use your data to go ahead and process your photos?
Well, there are a couple of answers to that question. One is, I would answer that in at least 3 ways. Number one, they have a C-Star program. So you can actually set up a C-Star down there. The rental's very modest, but it puts a C-Star in very dark skies. So that can be fun, very inexpensive. Number two, you could actually timeshare with some buddies. And what you could do is say, hey, I'm at NOVAC, send an email out. I would like to timeshare a telescope with 4 friends. We do an inexpensive, you can send an astrophysics down there, but you realize you can send a Red Cat down there, on an AM3. I mean, you could do it pretty inexpensively. And now you team up, you may find some interest. The other thing is there are models where some people who are taking images are beginning to make plans to rent out or sell their data so that you could do image processing on other people's data. So that's another model. I do not know specifically at StarFront of a timeshare telescope or even a rental telescope. Although on these C-Stars, I think you don't even have to buy the C-Star. They buy them and set them up and you just rent them. So the C-Stars is a very inexpensive entry point, and you could always team up with some people and do your own timeshare, which would be a lot of, I think it'd be a great club effort to have 4 or 5 people team up on a rig. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. Any other hands up? Any other questions?
We can't see the hands.
We can't see the hands. Can anybody, can people?
Just speak up if you got.
Okay, if you have any questions online, we still have a couple minutes left. I think we're good. Going, gone. Thanks for the hospitality. It's a real pleasure.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And you're quite right. There's a number of different models out there of people sharing from other parts of the country, other parts of the world. I mean, there's a lot of different people doing it. It's one of the reasons why we actually have people belonging to the club from all over the place now. And so, because some of them are doing it remotely and connecting, and this is going to get a lot more intense as we go on. We do have special interest groups for all sorts of things. If people want to create one on this would certainly be an appropriate thing to do it. So if we don't have any other questions, again, sorry about the IT issues, but it's nice to be here at Mason, and so we appreciate them letting us do it. Also, I'm noticing that because we're here when they're not here, there's no actually any heat in here, so it's actually beginning to get a little cold in here. And so there's all sorts of interesting things that happen in January. This was the 3rd January. We've had something weird happen. But anyway, we appreciate everyone coming tonight. We have about 15. We're going to be heading over to Old George. Certainly everyone's welcome. We're planning on at least 10. If there's one last chance, anybody else have anything else they want to say before we shut down for the night? Okay, well, thanks very much for everyone joining us, and we'll see you out on the observatory slides. Good night.